He told the blind boy to play something simple, but he had no idea the music would expose his arrogance to the entire world. This is Fallen Stories, where cruelty gets humiliated and dignity is vindicated. Subscribe and never miss the moment justice strikes. The grand conservatory hall gleamed like a jewel box. The chandeliers flickered with gold fire, every crystal catching the light. Perfume, champagne, and expensive cologne tangled with the scent of polished wood. The walls held portraits of pale-faced composers, their eyes peering down like gatekeepers of the past. Velvet seats swallowed the audience in soft silence except for the occasional cough of someone who wanted to be noticed. Diamonds glinted on fingers clutching programs embossed in gold. This wasn't just a concert. It was a stage for power, for donors, critics, and elites who measured people's worth by ticket prices and surnames. At the center of this glittering room stood Victor Langley, a pianist with a career polished by agents and PR teams. At 42, he moved like he owned the air. His tuxedo was a knife edge of perfection, his smile rehearsed to cut as clean as applause. Victor had a reputation, brilliant technique, no soul. But no one said it aloud, not if they wanted an invitation back. Near the stage, guided by a white cane, walked Malik Carter. 16. Tall, awkward, with a jacket too big for his shoulders and elbows patched by careful hands. His aunt worked as a cleaner at the conservatory. She had brought him tonight as a kind of gift, thinking maybe inspiration could bloom where opportunity never had. Malik had lost his sight 8 years earlier. Darkness had not stolen his love of music. It had deepened it. He learned pieces by touch, by sound, by heart. To him, every phrase was a landscape felt through fingertips. But to the crowd, he looked like a novelty, a charity case, a symbol for brochures. Victor noticed him at once and smirked. Victor leaned toward the microphone, his voice smooth but sharp enough to draw blood. "Well now, what's this? A guest from our support staff? How lovely, tell me, young man. Can you play? Tell me, young man, can you play?" The hall chuckled, polite, cruel, complicit. Malik stood still. His cane tapped lightly once against the polished stage, the sound like a heartbeat. "Yes," he said simply. Victor widened his smile, tilting his head. "Ah, splendid. How about a little tune for us? Something light? Maybe Happy Birthday?" The crowd laughed louder. A few whispered, "Adorable." Malik's aunt stiffened in her seat, her hands clutching the program. She whispered a quick apology, but Victor waved it away with mock graciousness. No, let him try. After all, charity is about surprises, isn't it?" The audience thought this was generosity. It was the beginning of humiliation. Victor gestured toward the massive Steinway piano, its polished lid gleaming like black water. "Well then," he said, his voice dripping with superiority. "Let's hear you." Malik stepped forward slowly, fingertips brushing the smooth surface of the piano as if greeting an old friend. He tilted his head toward Victor, his unseeing eyes calm. "I'd rather play Bach," Malik said quietly. The hall stilled. A cough echoed like thunder. Whispers darted through the velvet rows. Victor's smile flickered. "Bach?" he repeated, the words sour. "Which one?" "Partita numero 2. In C minor." The whispers grew louder. Someone muttered, "Impossible." Another scoffed, "He's bluffing." Victor chuckled, but it was brittle. "That's not a child's party trick." "You even know how it begins?" Malik's hands hovered over the keys. "Yes, and I know you've been playing it wrong." Gasps fluttered through the room like startled birds. The boy hadn't played a note, but he had already struck the first blow. Victor's pride pricked. He sat beside Malik, hands on the keys. "Fine. Let's test you. I'll start. You follow." He played the opening bars but deliberately shifted key, a subtle trick, designed to make Malik stumble, to expose him as a pretender. The notes rang sharp, deliberate, like a cruel teacher setting an impossible exam. The audience smiled knowingly. They expected the boy to falter. But Malik lifted his chin. His head tilted as though listening to the memory of 1,000 practice hours in the dark. Then he spoke, calm but cutting. "That's in D, the partita is in C minor. Bach wrote it after losing his wife. Each movement is grief, translated. The silence that followed was thick, almost physical. Victor's fingers froze on the keys, his smile was gone. The trap had been set, but the jaws closed on the wrong man. Victor leaned closer, whispering with a hiss only Malik could hear. This isn't your stage. Don't embarrass yourself, Malik placed both hands on the keys. His voice carried, clear as glass. I'm not here to embarrass myself. I'm here to remind you. The crowd leaned in, confused, expectant. Malik did not strike the keys yet. He paused, deliberately, masterfully. The pause itself was power. Has anyone here, Malik asked, ever lost everything in a single heartbeat? A ripple moved through the hall. Some frowned. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others listened. It was no longer a performance. It was a reckoning waiting in silence. Malik inhaled. His fingers curved. He was ready. The first note was about to fall. The first notes. Malik's hands fell on the keys, and the sound that bloomed was nothing like the audience expected. It wasn't timid. It wasn't hesitant. It was a blade. The opening bars of Bach's Partita number 2 rang sharp and flawless, every note clean as rainwater on stone. Malik didn't need sheet music. He didn't need sight. He had memorized grief itself, and now he translated it through ivory and steel. The audience froze. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. A woman's jeweled hand dropped her program. The boy they thought was a novelty was already commanding the room. Victor stood a few steps back, arms folded, lips pressed thin. At first he smirked, confident the boy would stumble, but as the arpeggios soared, his smirk faltered. Malik's playing wasn't just correct, it was alive. Where Victor played with precision, Malik played with memory, bending each phrase just enough to speak. The bass line growled like distant thunder. The treble whispered like breath against glass. Even the rests, the silences between notes, had weight. Victor's jaw tightened. He glanced at the critics in the front row, and for the first time in years he saw doubt in their eyes. He had offered the boy a test, but the boy was now testing him. Gasps began to ripple. Patrons leaned forward in their seats, some wiped at tears they didn't expect. A man whispered, "Do you hear that phrasing? That's not mimicry. That's mastery." Another murmured, "I've never heard Victor play it with such soul." Victor heard the whispers too. They sliced deeper than any critique. He had built a career on technical perfection, but here was a blind teenager pouring storms and funerals into every note. It wasn't only a performance, it was a revelation. Unable to bear it, Victor strode back to the piano and pressed down a sharp chord, clashing Malik's line. The audience jolted at the intrusion. "Follow me then," Victor said loudly, masking panic with arrogance. He began to play alongside Malik, faster, louder, trying to dominate. His fingers blurred in a display of virtuosity meant to drown the boy out. But Malik didn't flinch. He adjusted seamlessly, weaving Victor's forced tempo back into the true rhythm. It was as if he'd anticipated the sabotage. His hands became rivers flowing around Victor's strikes, turning them into part of the storm. What Victor intended as disruption became fuel for Malik's power. Victor tried to expose the boy. Instead, he exposed himself. Malik slowed, deliberately, returning the music to Bach's intended tempo. Victor stumbled, his fingers tangling for half a bar, the error loud as a slap. Gasps rang out. Cameras caught the slip. A critic scribbled furiously in his notebook. Another raised her phone, capturing video that would later explode across the internet. Victor froze, chest heaving. He had never, not in 30 years, faltered so publicly. And standing beside him, Malik's face was serene, his head tilted slightly upward, as if listening to something purer than the room itself. For the first time, the great Victor Langley looked small. The audience began to cheer mid-piece, an etiquette-shattering breach. They weren't just applauding music. They were applauding defiance. Every note Malik played was a rebuke to cruelty, every phrase a reminder that genius doesn't need tuxedos or patronage. It only needs truth. By the time he struck the final chord, the entire hall rose in a standing ovation. The applause was thunder. Cheers erupted, echoing through chandeliers. Victor stood rigid, hands trembling at his sides. The ovation wasn't for the master. It was for the boy they tried to mock. Victor grabbed the microphone, desperate to reclaim the stage. Remarkable, truly remarkable, he said, voice brittle. But let's not forget— Forget what? Someone shouted from the balcony. That you mocked him? The audience turned, not on Malik, but on Victor. Phones lifted, flashes popped. Every angle captured the fall of a man whose arrogance had finally cracked. Malik rose from the bench, bowed slightly, not toward Victor, but toward the crowd, and stepped back, cane tapping once against the floor. His aunt stood in tears, clapping harder than anyone, pride radiating like fire. Minutes later, backstage, Victor stormed into the green room, chest heaving, hair damp with sweat. His agent met him with a pale face. "It's over," the agent whispered. "That video is everywhere already. Do you understand?" Everywhere, Victor slammed his fist into the wall. It was a stunt. A setup. But even he didn't believe it. He had seen the truth in the audience's eyes. They hadn't witnessed a stunt. They'd witnessed revelation and humiliation. For a man who built his empire on applause, silence now surrounded him like chains. Meanwhile, Malik walked with his aunt into the cool night air. He carried no trophies, no paycheck, only the echo of his performance still alive in the air. "Did I do it right?" he asked softly. His aunt's voice cracked. "You didn't just play it right. You showed them who you are." Malik nodded, his face calm. "Then it's enough." Above them, neon lights blinked, traffic hummed, the ordinary world moving on. But in that hall behind them, history had shifted. The night had begun as a humiliation. It ended as a coronation. By morning, the clip had spread like wildfire. 30 seconds of humiliation. Victor sneering into the mic, Malik calmly correcting him, and then the standing ovation that shook the chandeliers. It was everywhere. Instagram reels, Twitter threads, news outlets replaying the moment with captions like, "Blind teen exposes famous pianist live on stage." Within hours, Victor's name wasn't trending for triumph. It was trending for arrogance. Memes appeared, his scowl frozen beside Malik's calm face, captions like, "Who really played the right notes?" For years, Victor controlled the stage. Now the stage controlled him. The conservatory board convened in hushed panic. Sponsors whispered. Critic columns shifted overnight from Victor Langley, polished genius, to Langley lacks the heart his young rival showed in one performance. Bookings evaporated. Festivals quietly removed him from their lineups. Invitations stopped arriving. Agents who once fought to represent him now let their phones ring unanswered. Victor's reputation wasn't damaged. It was demolished. He sat in his penthouse staring at the city lights, the sound of silence louder than any ovation he had ever heard. His fingers twitched over the keys of his grand piano, but no melody came. Only shame. He had mocked the boy for blindness, but it was his own blindness that destroyed him. Meanwhile, Malik returned to his modest apartment above a diner. The cheap keyboard in the corner was still waiting, its plastic keys worn smooth by endless hours. But this time, it wasn't just him and the keys. His inbox overflowed. Music schools wanted him. Journalists wanted him. A scholarship from the Galliard School of Music sat waiting with his name on it. His aunt unfolded the letter with trembling hands, her eyes filling as she read aloud. Full tuition. Housing. Everything covered. Malik sat quietly, his face calm. "That means I can keep playing." "Yes," his aunt whispered. "It means the world will finally hear you." He didn't play for applause, but now applause was chasing him. A week later, at a small press conference, Victor tried to repair what remained of his image. He wore humility like an ill-fitting suit. Cameras clicked. He read from a paper, voice carefully measured. "I misjudged. I was cruel. I apologized to Malik Carter and his family. His performance was extraordinary," reporters scribbled. Some nodded, but the sincerity was questioned instantly online. "He's only sorry because he got caught," one comment read. Thousands agreed. Later, away from cameras, Victor requested to meet Malik privately. The boy arrived with his aunt, cane tapping softly against the marble floor. Victor's voice shook, not with arrogance, but with something foreign. Shame. "You destroyed me out there," he admitted. Malik tilted his head. No, you destroyed yourself. I only played the words hit Victor harder than booze ever could. Humiliation wasn't handed to him, it was pulled from inside him. Days passed, then weeks. Victor withdrew from public life, but privately he began to change. For the first time in decades, he played not for audiences, but for himself. He listened to Malik's recording over and over, hearing the grief and honesty he had missed his whole career. And slowly, in the cracks of his pride, humility began to grow. He reached out again, not for a press stunt, but with an offer. Let me help you. Not as a teacher above a student, but as a man who has finally learned what music means. Malik accepted. Not out of pity, but out of grace. The boy he mocked became the teacher he needed. Months later, Malik stood on another stage. This time, not as a charity anecdote, but as a featured performer. The hall was packed. Critics leaned forward, pens ready, but their notes turned into silence as they listened. The boy played, and the room wept. Afterward, headlines read, "Blind prodigy stuns world with soulful genius." Scholarships multiplied. Opportunities bloomed. But Malik remained the same. Quiet, humble, his aunt always in the front row. He used his newfound platform to fund programs for kids like him, children overlooked, dismissed, or mocked. He brought music into places that had no instruments, teaching them the same truth he had lived. You are more than what the world decides you are. He turned cruelty into a seed and planted it as hope for others. Victor was invited to one of Malik's concerts months later. He sat anonymously in the back row, hidden under a cap. When Malik performed the partita again, Victor felt his throat tighten. This wasn't humiliation delivered by Malik. It was humiliation sustained by memory. He realized that every arrogant smirk, every cruel word, every sneer had been unnecessary. Malik had never needed to defeat him. Victor had defeated himself. When the ovation thundered, Victor stood too, clapping until his hands stung. For the first time in his life, he was applauding not from envy, not from competition, but from respect. Malik never gloated. He never threw back the insults. His victory wasn't revenge, it was truth. Because humiliation destroys itself. Because evidence doesn't lie. Because justice sometimes plays in keys and silence. A badge, a trophy, or a title can be taken, but truth in your hands cannot. Don't judge someone by what you think they lack. Judge them by what they carry inside. Because that's what will one day be revealed. This was Fallen Stories. If Malik's gift moved you, subscribe now.